Have you ever wondered what these glamorous Golden Age Hollywood stars were really like when the cameras stopped rolling? Behind the perfect makeup and elegant gowns, some of these famous actresses shocked their contemporaries with behavior that went far beyond what society considered proper for ladies of their time. Who were these boundary pushers who dared to live by their own rules in an era when women were expected to be demure and proper? Let's pull back the curtain on Hollywood's most delightfully vulgar leading ladies. Mae West, the original queen of innuendo. Mae West wasn't just vulgar for her time. She practically invented a new form of vulgarity disguised as wit. Born in 1893, West began her career in vaudeville before making her way to Broadway, where she wrote and starred in plays so scandalous that she was arrested and briefly jailed in 1927 for her play titled Sex. When she finally arrived in Hollywood at age 40, she brought with her a suitcase full of double entendres that would make censors work overtime. West's entire persona was built around sexual innuendo delivered with perfect timing and an arched eyebrow. Her most famous line, "Come up and see me sometime," delivered to Cary Grant in She Done Him Wrong, 1933, became so popular it was misquoted and repeated everywhere. She specialized in suggestive dialogue that sounded innocent enough on the surface, but left no doubt about her real meaning. "When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better," she purred in I'm No Angel, perfectly capturing her appeal. What made West truly revolutionary was her complete control over her image and material. She wrote many of her own screenplays and insisted on approval of her dialogue, ensuring that her particular brand of risque humor remained intact. West openly portrayed women who enjoyed sex and used their sexuality for power and pleasure, a radical concept in the 1930s. The Catholic Legion of Decency specifically cited her films when campaigning for stricter censorship, and the enforcement of the Production Code in 1934 was partly a response to her popularity. Mae West wasn't just vulgar. She was dangerously vulgar in a way that threatened the social order. Tula Bankhead, Hollywood's wild woman. If Mae West cleverly disguised her vulgarity behind innuendo, Tula Bankhead made no attempt to hide hers. Born into a prominent Alabama political family, her father would become Speaker of the House of Representatives. Bankhead rebelled spectacularly against her proper upbringing. With her husky voice and outrageous personality, she became legendary not just for her acting, but for her uninhibited behavior, both on and off stage. Bankhead was famous for her crude language at a time when ladies simply didn't swear. She reportedly smoked 120 cigarettes a day, drank heavily, and was open about her drug use, particularly cocaine. When her father warned her to stay away from alcohol and men when she moved to New York, she later quipped, "He didn't say anything about women and cocaine." This kind of candor about substance use was shocking for the era, especially coming from a woman of her social standing. Her sexual appetites were equally legendary. Bankhead made no secret of her relationships with both men and women, once famously declaring, "My father warned me about men and booze, but he never mentioned a word about women and cocaine." She claimed to have slept with over 5,000 people in her lifetime and was investigated by British authorities in the 1920s for allegedly seducing schoolboys at Eton College. Her wild parties and uninhibited lifestyle made her a fixture in gossip columns, and she was so notorious that she ended up on the Hays Commission's Doom Book of performers considered too immoral for the general public. Bankhead's response? She mockingly referred to the list's creator Will Hays as a Presbyterian prude. Jean Harlo, the original blonde bombshell. Jean Harlo revolutionized Hollywood's idea of sex appeal with her platinum blonde hair and unabashed sensuality. Unlike the coy flappers of the 1920s, Harlo brought a raw, explicit sexuality to the screen that shocked audiences and censors alike. Her breakthrough role in Howard Hughes's Hell's Angels, 1930, established her as a new kind of sex symbol, brash, working class, and unapologetically carnal. What made Harlo particularly scandalous was her rumored habit of going without underwear beneath her clingy satin gowns. These dresses were often cut on the bias and designed to show every curve of her body. In films like Red Dust, 1932, where she famously bathed in a rain barrel, the thin fabric clinging to her body left little to the imagination. Whether the rumors about her lack of undergarments were true or studio publicity, they contributed to her risque image and made her name synonymous with sexual liberation. Harlo's on-screen characters mirrored her bold image. In films like Red-Headed Woman, 1932, she played sex. Aggressive women who used men for advancement and pleasure without remorse. One famous scene shows her character's boss slapping her, to which she responds excitedly, "Do it again, I like it." Such explicit masochism was shocking for the time. Harlo's early death at age 26 cut short a career that was constantly pushing boundaries, but her influence on Hollywood's portrayal of female sexuality was permanent, paving the way for future sex symbols while cementing her legacy as one of film's most daring actresses. Joan Blondelle, the wisecracking working girl. Joan Blondelle may not have the same scandalous reputation as some of her contemporaries, but her pre-code films reveal an actress who specialized in playing worldly, sexually experienced working-class women with sharp tongues and knowing eyes. A Warner Brothers contract player in the early 1930s, Blondelle appeared in over 100 films during her career, often portraying characters who were far from demure. In films like Night Nurse, 1931, Blondelle was frequently seen in various stages of undress, with scenes of her changing clothes or lounging in lingerie. These scenes weren't just gratuitous. They established her characters as comfortable with their bodies and sexuality in a way that was quite modern for the time. Blondelle had a natural, unfussy sensuality that contrasted with the more manufactured glamour of other stars, making her seem more accessible and real. What truly made Blondelle stand out was her delivery of risque dialogue. She could make innocent lines sound suggestive through her expert timing and knowing expressions. In Blonde Crazy, 1931, her banter with James Cagney crackles with sexual tension and innuendo. Blondelle excelled at playing women who had seen it all and weren't easily shocked. Women who could match men drink for drink and quip for quip. Though she would later transition to more maternal roles after the production code was enforced, Blondelle's early films showcase a performer who was decidedly adult and refreshingly frank about the realities of women's lives and desires. Clara Bo, the original It Girl. Clara Bo's expressive eyes and vibrant personality made her the definitive flapper of the 1920s. But her off-screen behavior scandalized even Hollywood. Rising from poverty in Brooklyn to become Paramount's biggest star, Bo lived as wildly as the jazz-age characters she portrayed on screen. Her uninhibited lifestyle made her a favorite target of gossip columnists and moral guardians. What set Bo apart wasn't just her romantic adventures, but her complete disregard for social norms regarding how a lady should behave. She spoke in a thick Brooklyn accent, used coarse language, and dressed flamboyantly. Hollywood's elite looked down on her as common and vulgar. When invited to fancy dinners, she reportedly shocked other guests by loudly discussing sex and using crude expressions. Unlike stars who developed a refined public persona, Bo remained defiantly working class in her speech and behavior. Her romantic life generated endless scandals. Rumors about her sexual appetite were so widespread that a common expression claimed she had slept with the entire USC football team, a cruel exaggeration that nonetheless reflected her reputation. When a secretary later tried to blackmail her with stories of her wild behavior, the resulting court case aired enough of Bo's dirty laundry to permanently damage her career. Though much of what was said about Bo was exaggerated or fabricated, her refusal to conform to proper behavior made her an easy target in an industry that was increasingly concerned with respectability as the production code took effect. Barbara Stanwyck, the tough-talking Brooklyn girl. Barbara Stanwyck brought an authenticity to her roles that came from her own hardscrabble upbringing. Orphaned at a young age in Brooklyn, she worked as a chorus girl and nightclub dancer before finding her way to Hollywood. This background gave her performances a streetwise edge that set her apart from more refined actresses of the era. Stanwyck excelled at playing morally ambiguous women in pre-code films like Babyface, 1933, where she portrayed a woman who explicitly sleeps her way to the top of a corporation. The original version of the film was so shocking that even before the code was strictly enforced, Warner Brothers was forced to shoot a new ending where her character loses her ill-gotten gains. Stanwyck made no attempt to soften these characters or make them more likable, bringing a hard-edged realism to roles that other actresses might have sweetened. In person, Stanwyck maintained her no-nonsense attitude. She was known for her direct manner of speaking and occasional profanity, unusual for a leading lady of her stature. Unlike stars who adopted cultured accents, she never completely lost her Brooklyn inflection. Fellow actress Barbara Stanwyck once described her as so alive, modern, frank, and natural that she stands out like a beacon on a lightship in this odd place called Hollywood. Recognizing how Stanwyck's authenticity set her apart in an industry built on artifice. Though she would eventually gain recognition as one of Hollywood's finest dramatic actresses, Stanwyck never fully shed the tough, slightly vulgar quality that made her early performances so memorable. Carole Lombard, the foul-mouthed comedienne. Behind Carole Lombard's ethereal beauty lurked the mouth of a sailor. Known as the profane angel, Lombard's ladylike appearance contrasted sharply with her colorful vocabulary and bawdy sense of humor. Her ability to swear creatively and extensively was legendary in Hollywood, shocking even hardened studio executives and fellow actors accustomed to rough language. Lombard developed this pattern of speech early in her career, partly as a defense mechanism. As a beautiful young actress, she was constantly fending off unwanted advances from men in the industry. By adopting crude language and a jocular, one-of-the-guys persona, she successfully redirected many men's attention away from romantic pursuit, while still maintaining professional relationships that could advance her career. What began as a strategy became an integral part of her personality. Her marriage to Clark Gable seemed unlikely on the surface, Hollywood's king paired with a woman known for hunting, fishing, and swearing like a drunken soldier. But Gable fell in love with precisely these qualities in Lombard, finding her authenticity refreshing after years of dealing with more mannered actresses. Though her screen roles rarely hinted at her colorful personality, those who knew her off-screen recognized that Lombard's bawdy humor and uninhibited speech were essential aspects of her charm. Her tragically early death in a 1942 plane crash at age 33 cut short the career of an actress who perfectly embodied the contradiction between Hollywood's polished public image and its sometimes raucous reality. Joan Crawford, the hard-edged survivor. Joan Crawford's carefully cultivated image as a sophisticated star concealed a woman whose rough origins occasionally showed through the glamorous facade. Born Lucille LeSueur into poverty in Texas, Crawford worked as a laundress and waitress before becoming a dancer. This hard-scrabble background gave her a determination to succeed at any cost, but also left her with insecurities about her refinement that would shape her entire career. Though Crawford worked diligently to eliminate any traces of vulgarity from her public persona, adopting refined speech and impeccable manners, her temper could shatter this careful construction. When angered, the elegant movie star would revert to coarse language and crude expressions that revealed her less polished origins. These outbursts became more frequent as her career progressed, particularly when she felt threatened or disrespected on set. Crawford's drinking exacerbated these tendencies. While many stars of the era drank heavily, Crawford became notorious for her alcohol consumption and the behavior that resulted. Her profanity-laced tirades when intoxicated became legendary, and younger actresses learned to avoid her at industry parties where alcohol flowed freely. As portrayed in her daughter Christina's controversial memoir, Mommy Dearest, Crawford's private behavior could be shockingly crude and violent, contrasting dramatically with her carefully maintained public image of sophistication and refinement. Marlene Dietrich, the gender-bending provocateur. Marlene Dietrich scandalized America not just with her sexual frankness, but with her deliberate blurring of gender boundaries. After her breakthrough in The Blue Angel, 1930, the German actress brought a European sensibility about sexuality to Hollywood that shocked American audiences. Her deep voice, mannish attire, and open bisexuality made her a uniquely subversive figure in Golden Age cinema. Dietrich famously wore men's clothing both on and off screen, at a time when women in pants could still cause a stir. In films like Morocco, 1930, she even kissed a woman on the lips, an act so daring for the time that audiences gasped. Her characters were sexually ambiguous and unashamedly promiscuous, with a worldly European attitude toward pleasure that felt alien to American moral standards. Even her walk was considered vulgar by some, a deliberate, hip-swaying strut that emphasized her sexuality. Off-screen, Dietrich's love life generated endless gossip. She maintained a long marriage, but conducted numerous affairs with both men and women, making little effort to hide her relationships. Her circle in Hollywood included many gay and lesbian figures at a time when homosexuality was rarely acknowledged. Dietrich's refusal to conform to conventional morality or gender expectations made her seem dangerously exotic to American audiences. While other stars might be forgiven for occasional vulgarity as a lapse in good breeding, Dietrich's transgressions were more threatening because they seemed to reflect a completely different value system, a European sophistication that challenged American Puritanism at its core. Betty Hutton, the hyperactive blonde bomber. Betty Hutton burst onto the screen with an explosive energy that earned her the nickname the Blonde Bomber. Unlike the cool sophistication of many leading ladies, Hutton specialized in a manic, uninhibited performance style that some critics found vulgar and excessive. Her singing often involved shouting rather than crooning, and her physical comedy featured pratfalls and wild gesticulations that pushed the boundaries of ladylike behavior. In films like The Miracle of Morgan's Creek, 1944, Hutton played characters whose exuberance bordered on the uncontrolled. Her performances were big in every sense. Big movements, big facial expressions, big emotions. This larger-than-life quality made her perfect for musical comedies, but also led to criticism that she was too broad, too loud, and ultimately too vulgar for a true leading lady. While other actresses might hint at excitement or desire, Hutton seemed to embody these emotions physically, creating a visceral, sometimes uncomfortable viewing experience. Off-screen, Hutton's personality matched her performance style. She spoke rapidly, laughed loudly, and generally dominated any room she entered. Studio publicists struggled to contain her boundless energy during interviews and public appearances. Though her boisterous manner endeared her to some fans who found it authentic and refreshing, it alienated others who preferred more restrained glamour from their screen idols. Hutton's career declined more rapidly than many of her contemporaries, suggesting that her particular brand of vulgarity, a working-class exuberance that refused containment, had limited appeal as audience tastes evolved toward more naturalistic performances. Lupe Veles, the Mexican Spitfire. Known as the Mexican Spitfire after her film series of the same name, Lupe Veles brought a fiery temperament and uninhibited sexuality to Hollywood that shocked even her fellow performers. Born in Mexico, Veles made no attempt to soften her passionate nature or explosive temper when she arrived in Hollywood in the late 1920s. Her thick accent and unfiltered expressions made her seem even more exotic and dangerous to American audiences. Veles was notorious for her public tantrums and physical fights. She once chased her lover, Gary Cooper, around a party with a knife when she caught him flirting with another woman. During her turbulent marriage to Johnny Weissmuller, the star of the Tarzan films, neighbors regularly called police to their home due to their violent, furniture-smashing arguments. Veles would scream profanities in Spanish and English, throwing whatever objects were within reach. Her romantic life generated endless scandals. She conducted very public affairs with Hollywood's leading men, including Charlie Chaplin and Clark Gable, discussing intimate details with gossip columnists. When angered by a lover, she would create spectacular scenes in public places, once dumping a plate of food on Cooper's head in a crowded restaurant. These displays of raw emotion were considered particularly vulgar in an era that prized feminine restraint. Veles's tragic suicide in 1944 at age 36, while pregnant by a man who refused to marry her, ended a career defined by passion both on and off screen, but her reputation as Hollywood's most volatile actress lived on. Theta Bar, the original vamp. Although her career peaked in the silent era just before Hollywood's golden age, Theta Bar deserves mention as the actress who pioneered the vamp persona that later stars would build upon. Born Theodosia Goodman to a middle-class Jewish family in Cincinnati, Bar was transformed by Fox Studios into an exotic seductress, supposedly born in the shadow of the Sphinx to a French artist and his Egyptian concubine. This manufactured biography was vulgar in its blatant Orientalism, playing on Western stereotypes about Eastern sexuality. Barra's films, most of which are now lost, featured her as a predatory woman who destroyed men through her irresistible sexual allure. In A Fool There Was, 1915, she utters the famous line, "Kiss me, my fool," while literally driving men to ruin. Her costumes were scandalously revealing for the time, with plunging necklines and transparent fabrics that left little to the imagination. Publicity photos showed her draped with snakes or posing with human skeletons, enhancing her reputation as not just sexually dangerous, but almost supernaturally evil. Though Barra herself was, by all accounts, a conventional, well-educated woman, the persona created for her was considered the height of vulgarity in the 1910s. Religious groups condemned her films as immoral and corrupting to public values. Several cities banned her movies entirely. The controversy surrounding Barra's vampish image helped establish the idea that female sexuality, when not properly controlled, was a destructive force, a concept that would influence Hollywood's portrayal of women for decades to come and make later actresses seem vulgar simply for expressing sexual agency. Dorothy Dandridge. Breaking taboos. Dorothy Dandridge's inclusion on a list of vulgar actresses has nothing to do with her actual behavior and everything to do with America's racist attitudes during Hollywood's golden age. As the first African-American woman nominated for a Best Actress Oscar, Dandridge broke barriers while facing impossible double standards. The mere fact of being a black woman who openly portrayed sexuality on screen was considered vulgar by many white audiences and critics of the time. In films like Carmen Jones, 1954, and Island in the Sun, 1957, Dandridge dared to play sexually confident women, roles that white actresses routinely performed without criticism. Island in the Sun featured an implied interracial romance between Dandridge and white actor John Justin, generating protests and theater boycotts across the southern United States. The film was banned in several cities simply because it hinted at the possibility of interracial desire. The tragic irony of Dandridge's career was that while white critics and audiences often found her too sensual and therefore vulgar, Hollywood simultaneously forced her into exoticized roles that emphasized her sexuality. Off-screen, Dandridge was known for her elegant demeanor and refined speech, yet she couldn't escape being labeled with stereotypes associated with black female sexuality. Her struggle highlights how vulgarity was often a racialized concept in Hollywood, applied unequally to performers based on their racial background rather than their actual conduct or performances. Anne Sheridan, the oomph girl. Anne Sheridan never particularly liked her studio-created nickname, the Oomph Girl, but it perfectly captured what made censors nervous about her screen presence. With her husky voice and knowing smirk, Sheridan projected a worldly sexuality that suggested she knew exactly what was happening behind closed doors. Unlike the manufactured bombshells who came later, Sheridan's appeal was in her authenticity. She seemed like a real woman with real desires. In films like They Drive by Night, 1940, and The Man Who Came to Dinner, 1942, Sheridan specialized in playing working-class women who used frank talk and direct approaches with men. Her characters didn't simper or play coy. They stated their interests plainly. This straightforward quality was considered somewhat vulgar by critics who preferred more ladylike performances. But it resonated with female audiences who recognized the reality behind her portrayals. Sheridan's off-screen personality matched her screen image. She was known for her bawdy sense of humor and ability to drink most men under the table. At studio parties, she could be counted on for ribald jokes that shocked more conservative guests. Though never involved in major scandals, Sheridan maintained a reputation as someone who spoke her mind regardless of social niceties. Her refusal to adopt the artificial refinement expected of Hollywood stars marked her as slightly vulgar in an industry obsessed with appearances, but it also made her one of Warner Bros.' most reliable stars throughout the 1940s. Jane Russell, the controversial bust. Jane Russell's film career began with a scandal so significant that it delayed her debut film's release for years. Cast by Howard Hughes in The Outlaw, 1943, Russell became infamous before audiences had even seen her on screen. Hughes, an aviation engineer, allegedly designed a special bra to maximize Russell's already generous bust line, then marketed the film almost exclusively around her physical attributes with suggestive publicity photos and the tagline, "What are the two great reasons for Jane Russell's rise to stardom?" The Production Code Administration was so troubled by the film's obvious exploitation of Russell's figure that they refused to approve its release. Hughes battled censors for years, using the controversy to generate publicity while making minimal changes to the actual content. When the film finally received limited release, Russell's tight blouses and frequent reclining poses, designed to emphasize her chest, shocked moral guardians but delighted audiences. One Maryland judge upheld a ban on the film, famously declaring that Russell's breasts hung over the production like a thunderstorm over a landscape. What made Russell's early career particularly vulgar by the standards of the time was not just her physicality, but the blatant way Hughes marketed her as a sex object with little regard for her acting abilities. Though Russell would later prove herself a capable performer, particularly in comedies like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, 1953, she was initially promoted as little more than an anatomical curiosity. Russell herself was uncomfortable with this exploitation but remained under Hughes's control due to a long-term contract. The controversy surrounding her debut established a pattern where her performances were constantly scrutinized for sexual content, making her a lightning rod for discussions about vulgarity in cinema. Marilyn Monroe, the dumb blonde. Who wasn't Marilyn Monroe's persona as a breathy-voiced blonde with an innocent sexuality seems almost quaint today. But in the 1950s, her open sensuality was considered vulgar by conservative critics. What made Monroe particularly threatening to the established order was the contradiction between her seemingly naive persona and the calculating intelligence behind it. Unlike earlier sex symbols who played overtly bad girls, Monroe created a character who seemed unaware of her own sexual power, a quality that somehow made her even more provocative. Monroe pushed boundaries with her performances in films like The 7-Year Itch, 1955, with its iconic scene of her standing over a subway grate as her white dress billows up around her. Though tame by modern standards, the scene caused outrage at the time and reportedly contributed to the breakdown of her marriage to Joe DiMaggio, who was furious about the public display. Even more controversial was her nude calendar photo that emerged early in her career. Rather than denying it, as most actresses would have done, Monroe admitted it frankly, saying she had needed the money. This honesty about financial desperation was considered almost as vulgar as the photo itself. Behind her carefully constructed image, Monroe was an intelligent woman who read widely and had serious artistic ambitions. This complexity made her even more dangerous to the status quo than actresses who simply played sexy roles. Her marriages to intellectual figures like Arthur Miller confused the public, who couldn't reconcile her dumb blonde screen persona with her evident interest in literature and politics. Monroe's vulgarity wasn't in her behavior. She was generally well-mannered and professional, but in her embodiment of female sexuality, at a time when American culture was desperately trying to push women back into domestic roles after their wartime independence. Jane Mansfield, deliberately outrageous. If Marilyn Monroe sometimes seemed uncomfortable with her sex symbol status, Jane Mansfield embraced and amplified hers to levels that many found utterly vulgar. Arriving in Hollywood after Monroe had already established the platinum blonde bombshell archetype, Mansfield needed to push boundaries even further to stand out. She did so by creating publicity stunts that showcased her 40-21-35 measurements at every opportunity, wearing outfits so revealing that they caused scandals whenever she appeared in public. Mansfield became notorious for wardrobe malfunctions that seemed suspiciously deliberate. At a dinner party thrown for Sophia Loren, Mansfield arrived in a dress cut so low that her nipples were barely covered, stealing attention from the Italian star in a moment captured in a famous photograph showing Loren staring disapprovingly at Mansfield's exposed cleavage. This kind of calculated exhibitionism was considered the height of vulgarity, particularly because it was so obviously planned rather than accidental. Beyond her physical display, Mansfield's personal life generated constant tabloid coverage. Her multiple marriages, affairs with high-profile men, including John F. Kennedy, and her association with Anton LaVey's Church of Satan all contributed to her reputation as someone who would do anything for publicity. Even her home, painted pink and filled with heart-shaped furniture and bathtubs, seemed designed to showcase a deliberately tacky aesthetic that embraced rather than avoided accusations of vulgarity. Though a genuinely intelligent woman who spoke 5 languages and played violin and piano, Mansfield crafted a public persona that pushed the boundaries of acceptable female behavior so far that even Hollywood was sometimes scandalized. Ava Gardner, the beautiful animal. Ava Gardner's extraordinary beauty might have made her a conventional star, but her untamed spirit and refusal to adopt ladylike behavior marked her as dangerously vulgar in the eyes of studio executives. Raised in rural poverty in North Carolina, Gardner never completely shed her country roots, even as she became one of Hollywood's most glamorous stars. Her thick Southern accent and occasional use of profanity shocked the Hollywood elite, who expected more refinement from someone so beautiful. Gardner's drinking was legendary, even in a town where alcohol flowed freely. She could consume enormous quantities of whiskey without showing effects, and often challenged male co-stars to drinking contests that she usually won. During her marriage to Frank Sinatra, their alcohol-fueled arguments became the stuff of Hollywood legend, with both parties screaming obscenities and sometimes becoming physically violent. Gardner made no attempt to hide her enjoyment of drinking, smoking, and staying out all night, behaviors considered particularly inappropriate for women. Her love life generated constant scandals. Beyond her high-profile marriages to Mickey Rooney, Artie Shaw, and Sinatra, Gardner conducted affairs with numerous men, including married actors and international figures like Spanish bullfighters. She spoke frankly about sex in an era when ladies weren't supposed to acknowledge such matters. MGM's publicity department worked overtime to protect her from the consequences of her behavior, but couldn't completely sanitize her image. Gardner herself summed up the contradiction of her life when she said, "Deep down, I'm pretty superficial." This self-awareness about her own vulgarity somehow made it more authentic and appealing than the manufactured personas of many of her contemporaries. Shelley Winters, from bombshell to character actress. Shelley Winters began her career as a blonde bombshell but found greater success and generated more controversy when she embraced character roles that showcased her unfiltered personality. Unlike stars who maintained a glamorous facade at all times, Winters brought a raw emotional quality to her performances that some critics found excessive and vulgar, particularly in an era that prized restraint. In films like A Place in the Sun, 1951, and The Night of the Hunter, 1955, Winters played women from working-class backgrounds with an authenticity that came from her own experiences. She refused to soften her characters' rough edges or make them more palatable to middle-class audiences. This commitment to realism extended to her physical appearance. Winters famously gained weight for roles and allowed herself to look haggard or disheveled when the part required it, a choice that was considered almost indecent for a female star in image-conscious Hollywood. Off-screen, Winters became known for her blunt speaking style and willingness to share intimate details of her relationships with male stars like Marlon Brando, William Holden, and Sean Connery. Her autobiographies contained explicit accounts of her sexual encounters that shocked readers used to more discreet Hollywood memoirs. As she aged, Winters leaned into her reputation for vulgarity, appearing on talk shows where she would tell ribald stories and occasionally flirt outrageously with male hosts or guests. While this behavior made her a favorite with audiences who appreciated her authenticity, it also reinforced her status as someone who lacked the refinement expected of a Hollywood star. Gloria Graham, the bad girl specialist. Gloria Graham specialized in playing women from the wrong side of the tracks, bringing a smoldering sexuality to film noir that pushed the boundaries of the production code. With her distinctive upper lip, reportedly the result of padding her mouth with cotton, and sultry voice, Graham created an indelible screen presence that radiated carnal knowledge. In films like The Big Heat, 1953, where she famously has coffee thrown in her face, and Human Desire, 1954, she portrayed women whose sexuality marked them as both dangerous and vulnerable. What made Graham particularly unsettling to censors was the masochistic quality she brought to many of her performances. Her characters often seemed to derive pleasure from their own degradation, suggesting sexual appetites that went beyond conventional romance. Though these elements were necessarily subtle due to censorship restrictions, audiences and critics recognized the perversity underlying many of her most memorable roles. This association with deviant sexuality marked her as vulgar in a way that threatened the moral order the production code was designed to protect. Graham's personal life eventually eclipsed her professional accomplishments when it was revealed that after divorcing her second husband, director Nicholas Ray, she later married his son, her former stepson, Anthony Ray. The scandal of this unconventional relationship effectively ended her Hollywood career. Though the relationship with Anthony began when he was an adult, the taboo nature of becoming romantically involved with a former stepson was considered beyond the pale, even in an industry accustomed to unusual arrangements. The scandal reinforced Graham's association with transgressive sexuality and marked her permanently as someone whose private behavior was as morally ambiguous as the characters she portrayed on screen.